You think you've seen the strangest things life can offer. Imagine standing in an ancient Kyoto temple on a chilly morning in 1045. You're an old monk, your memories layered like the moss-covered tiles of the roof, witnessing what people 1,000 years later would still call Japan's most shocking wedding. Mist slithers through the wooden pillars, weaving between the rhythmic thump of ceremonial drums and the hushed murmurs of court nobles. Everyone's whispering about the wild rumor today. Emperor Go-Reizei, a 35-year-old man, will marry a 7-year-old girl as his empress. It's a wedding no one dares name directly, only muttering cryptic phrases like the pawn's wedding or the coldest union in history. You stand under the temple's eaves, the sharp scent of incense stinging your nose, a cold sweat trickling down your spine. Memories of past royal weddings flicker through your mind, but none have ever made you feel like an uninvited ghost caught in a game of unseen forces. They say today will mark a turning point in history. They say, from this moment, a child's innocence and fate will be buried beneath layers of ritual and heartless vows. You're not sure who's right or wrong. All you know is that your eyes are glued to the great wooden door, where a tiny girl is about to step into the imperial court and into a sentence no one dares name. As the ceremonial procession begins, a chilling whisper rises behind you. Will blood be spilled or just tears? You wonder how many will recount this day. And who will remember that little girl after the heavy curtain of power falls? A wedding, a transaction, or the theft of a childhood? Today, you're a witness. And history doesn't forgive those who look away. Have you ever wondered if a palace can feel? Do the cedar pillars in Toji's grand hall tremble at the sound of a child's silent tears? Does the curved roof, etched with time, bow for a stolen childhood? Today, as you watch Shizuko step forward, every stone and wooden beam seems to sigh a weary, helpless breath. Muffled beneath layers of gilded lacquer, Shizuko a name like a soft breeze. A hurried prayer blending with the temple bells in late autumn. Your eyes are fixed on her. A girl as delicate as a cicada's wing at season's end, her round, pale face framed by large, dark eyes, deep as an ancient well, hiding countless fallen leaves. She walks, or rather, is led flanked by rows of court ladies in gold-embroidered robes, their hands cradling red paper lanterns. The lanterns are light as a whisper, but your heart feels heavy, as if you're witnessing a silent, funeral procession for the purity of a human life. Some might think, she's too young to understand what's happening, but you, with eyes that have pierced countless masks, know better. In her gaze, fear and wonder tangle, a quiet sadness pooling like an autumn lake. Hizuko doesn't cry. At 7, a child might weep over a stumble or a lost toy, but not for the loss of freedom, not when everything familiar dissolves into mist. And strangeness. Each step she takes on the red carpet feels like a tread on whispers long dead. You wonder, what images flood her small mind? The lullaby of her mother's voice in the night? The sweet taste of fresh mochi? The scent of her father's hair after the New Year's rites? You recall your grandmother's words. When a child is forced to grow up too soon, their memories don't fade, they turn to stone, buried deep, only to surface as tears in adulthood. The palace glimmers with gold and splendor, yet you notice faint cracks in the pillars, scratches on the stone steps, as if perfection is just a fragile mask hiding unspoken pain. You see Shizuko's tiny hand clutch the hem of her robe. You notice her toes tremble with each step. Outside, moths flutter around the lanterns, trapped in the ceremony's glassy shell. Inside, Shizuko's heart circles a silent flame of fire of confusion, a yearning to cling to someone and ask, does anyone understand me? You remember your own childhood, when you thought growing up meant freedom. Now, you see it means losing pieces of your peace, one by one. After the wedding, they lead Shizuko to the Empress's quarters, a space both beautiful and terrifying. Scarlet. Walls, white silk curtains, paper-thin window panes. Every object looms too large for its tiny new occupant. You stand outside, watching her sit silently by the window, her legs dangling, unable to touch the floor, her eyes fixed on the distance, where a silver moon hangs, thin as her loneliness. The palace overflows with gold, flowers, and poetry, but lacks warmth and laughter. The adults around her, the old nursemaid, the stern guards, the young attendants are consumed with ritual and duty. Their eyes are cold, their smiles rehearsed, and none dare sit beside her to ask, "Shizuko, what do you think? How do you feel?" You see it clearly. Each night, the palace lanterns cast a dim glow, outlining a small girl curled by her bed, whispering to a paper doll. Perhaps she wishes to go home. Perhaps she recounts a dream where she runs through grass or plays hide and seek under a peach tree. You hear her footsteps each morning, light as early rain, cautious and hesitant, startling when a door swings wide. You know that from today, every breath, glance, and question of hers will be recorded, dissected, and wielded as a tool in the quarrels of adults in rooms. She's barred from entering. People say, children forget quickly. You don't believe it. You know what happens to Shizuko today will linger, weaving into her dreams, her stumbles, the sudden spring gusts years from now. Her pain is like a small tear in a tatami mat, barely noticeable at first, but widening with each passing day. In the stillness, you wonder, what lies ahead for Shizuko? A true friend? A king who sees her as a daughter, a pawn, or merely a shadow on the board of power? You think of the children's laughter at the morning market, mud on their clothes, rain-soaked hair, fingers sticky with ripe PERSIMMON. In this palace, there's no room for mess. No one brave enough to break protocol and let a child cry loudly or laugh freely. You are a witness. You realize that on the day Shizuko dons her first wedding robe, she begins to learn silence, to hide her true feelings. You recall Toni Morrison's words, "What is forgotten persists, quiet and stubborn, like shadows lurking under the roof." Shizuko's childhood, like that of countless children trapped in ritual and duty, doesn't vanish. It becomes an underground stream, a quiet sorrow seeping into her bones, her memories, her life. This story, you know, is far from over. The palace. Doors haven't opened wide enough for a sigh to escape. You will see Shizuko grow or break within these walls of power and endless shadows. But tonight, you can only pray silently for a child robbed of her youth, for a soul still hoping for a miracle at the edge of this gilded world where even the wind dares not speak its truth. You'll never forget that morning, though time has blurred many details. Perhaps memory is a room with many windows. You peer in and see a tiny Shizuko, silent amid a scene too vast, too alien. Or perhaps memory is just a fragile thread tying yesterday to today, and sometimes you wonder, did I truly witness it all? After the ceremony, the palace resumes its artificial calm. Everything glimmers but feels hollow, as if light is used to banish the real darkness. Shizuko is now an empress. In a single morning, she's transformed from a child into a symbol, or rather, a ghost of her own childhood. You think about what Shizuko brought with her into the palace. Not a suitcase of clothes, not strings of pearls, not even her mother's ancient poetry books. What she truly carries is memory. It's shapeless, a faint scent lingering on her sleeve, a scrap of paper folded into a boat, the echo of her little brother's laughter from home. Those weigh more than gold. You overhear the adults whispering, "How will the young empress live? Will she have a companion?" You want to answer, but no one asks you. Some questions, like fallen cherry blossoms, are beautiful but ignored. They drift across the ground, piling into layers of forgotten moments. Shizuko lives in a grand room or white paper windows catch the morning sun, but never truly warm. You think the room is like a box that traps, sound-only whispers remain, the rustle of silk robes, the cautious steps of attendants terrified of making a mistake. In the mornings, Shizuko sits at a low table, practicing calligraphy with a brush. Black ink spreads across paper. Once you saw her draw a small house with a thatched roof and butterflies hovering above. Perhaps it's a memory of home, or just something she longs for, but will never have. You carry your own memories of running through rain, the chime of temple bells, a bowl of steaming rice on a cold night. You wonder, what does someone carry? When thrown into a world where every decision is made for them, every emotion locked away like a forbidden treasure. At night, the palace becomes another realm. Fear grows like the shadows of adults cast by candlelight. Shizuko lies on her mat, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling. Beyond the window, the moon peeks through. The night smells of old wood, cold air, and unwept tears. You know she fears the dark, though you never ask. Sometimes you're afraid too. Afraid of the endless silence. Afraid the future is a room without doors. Afraid that one day, no one will remember children like Shizuko, entangled in the silken threads of ritual and power, tightening with each passing day. You recall a moment when Shizuko whispered to her paper doll, "If I had magic, I'd fly. Away from here, like a swallow, like the butterflies on mother's robe." You're not sure if it was a prayer or a fragment of a dream lost in the long night. Another thing Shizuko carries, you think, is loneliness. Beyond the stone walls and cold moat, the city lives on. Children chase each other, vendors call out, selling grilled fish at dawn. But in the palace, everything is scheduled, aligned, locked in silence. She has a friend or something, like a young attendant named Keo. They speak in whispers, as if afraid to disturb the royal spirits sleeping. Beneath the cold stone floor, Keo tells stories. Shizuko laughs softly. Each time, you feel the palace air soften, if only for a fleeting moment, like a stray bell ringing through the wind. What a child carries into life is more than adults imagine. Once you saw Shizuko bite her lip, her gaze distant. You wonder if she still remembers her real name or only the title of Empress forced into her small existence. The truth is, you're no longer certain of anything. Each day, the palace feels like a maze. People come and go, stories are told, then forgotten or twisted into something else. You hear rumors that Emperor Go-Reizei has never looked directly into the young Empress's eyes. That each evening, he leaves a single white plum blossom on her table and departs without a word. Perhaps the rumors are false. Perhaps in a fleeting moment, the emperor looked at the child and saw in her eyes the same regret only those who've lost their childhood can recognize. Sometimes, you dream of Shizuko sitting on the palace roof, releasing paper butterflies into the courtyard, each one a nameless wish. You wonder if you ever dreamed like that as a child, when you still believed dreams could be held in your hands. You know that what we carry has two sides. One is memory, hope, a faint light in the dark. The other is scars, pain, a shadow that stretches forever. Shizuko will grow up with both, or perhaps, like so many children who've passed through this palace, she'll fade into silence. As months pass, you realize the cruelest thing isn't the rituals or the power, it's forgetting. Forgetting erodes childhood. Forgetting makes people believe this is just a minor anecdote in the vast sea of history. You've carried Shizuko's story in your heart, like the scent of morning tea smoke, the sound of footsteps on wooden corridors, the gnawing regret that someone should have held that child, called her by her true name, let her cry, dream, and carry the softest parts of childhood into her life. But all you have is should have been. And you know, In this world, should have been is the heaviest thing anyone carries. You've heard the elders say that in places heavy with sorrow, stone walls hold secrets at night. There are footsteps without form, sobs without sound, and every breeze along the corridors carries an untold story. That palace, the gilded splendor you once thought was only for adults, is a golden cage trapping children with hearts flickering like unsteady flames. You stand in the darkness on the veranda, listening to the wind slip through the door's cracks. A faint, ancient scent lingers, yellowed paper, a child's hair, wilting camellia blossoms mingling in the air. Each night, as the rituals fade into sleep, loneliness thickens like fog. Yet in that darkness, there are whispers, sighs, tiny sounds you recognize as life itself. Shizuko's life. Some nights, she sits curled by the paper window, her fingers tracing meaningless shapes on the pane, or perhaps secret signs meant for the wind. Her eyes are wide, searching the dark for something nameless. You imagine being Shizuko. If you had one wish, you'd ask for brighter dreams, or simply for someone to whisper your name in a space where no one listens. In the palace, adults move through endless cycles of ceremony. Breakfast, lunch, afternoon tea, calligraphy lessons, each timed and placed with precision. But for Shizuko, time flows to its own rhythm, slow like water dripping from eaves after rain. You see it clearly. She lives in a world only she understands. There, memories in old tapestry, each crease a moment missing her mother, each tear a question about the meaning of it all. You recall, one early morning, Shizuko woke to the sound of sparrows, soft sunlight spilling through the paper window, bathing her pillow and hair in a faint, fragile gold. She turned, gazed at the ceiling, and whispered something only the wind could hear. You wanted to step inside, to ask, "Are you okay?" But your throat tightened in this palace. Who dares ask with sincerity? Once, when Kaio, Shizuko's young companion, sneaked a sweet bun into her room, the two sat eating under the glow of a lantern. Their laughter rang out, faint but clear. Like silver bells. In those moments, you realized, even in a golden cage, small joys slip through, like sunlight lingering at dusk. But darkness always lurks. It creeps through the corridors, hiding in whispers of factions, power, loyalty, and betrayal. One day, you overhear gossip. The emperor grows colder. The inner court is changing attendants reassigned, guards sent away. Even a nursemaid banished to her village without explanation. The air carries the scent of unease, of danger, of questions no one answers. You watch Shizuko, her eyes now hesitate, scanning adults for clues. You know a child forced to grow up too soon learns to hear every shift in tone, every change in stride. Emperor Go-Rise's silence is a heavy curtain, smothering the last traces of light. You wonder, does Shizuko know fear? Or does she only feel life as a vast current sweeping her along without a choice of shore? One evening, passing her room, you see her by the window, moonlight on her cheek, and you're certain you glimpse a tear in the palace. Everyone carries a burden. Adults bear ambition, fear, and schemes. Children carry questions. Why am I here? Why? Doesn't mother come? Why does every day feel the same, only differing by the flowers on the altar? You recall your grandmother's words. Some sorrows have no name. They sink into your bones, become shadows in your eyes, a sigh for no reason. At dusk, Shizuko, you think, embodies those nameless sorrows. Time passes, and each day in the palace adds another layer of dust to every memory. But beneath that dust, a seed quietly sprouts, the longing to live authentically. To be called by a tender voice, to run in the courtyard, to get dirty, to cry, to laugh, to fall without being scolded. One afternoon, you see Shizuko on the veranda, watching the rain, her palms catching cold drops. You realize her tears aren't just her own, but for all the children whose childhoods were stolen, their names erased by the hands of Power Dot. You wonder, will Shizuko one day break the silence? Will she find her voice in this maze of shadows? You don't know the future, only that tonight, when every window is shut and every lamp extinguished, the palace's sigh lingers. And in that sigh is the name of a child you'll never forget. In this space of darkness and stray light, you silently pray for Shizuko and for yourself. Don't let sorrow turn to stone. Don't let darkness consume the fragile flame of the human heart. As Toni Morrison wrote, memory can save or destroy. And you know, with every breath, every step on the cold wooden floor, every child deserves to be remembered by their true name, by the gentle call of daylight's end. Some nights, you don't sleep. Perhaps the spirits in the palace don't either, wandering the corridors, sighing with the wind, hearing the silent cries of the small. You've lived long enough to know that silence can kill, and fear gnaws endlessly. Needing no voice, you look at Shizuko, the young Empress, still curled by the paper window, hand covering her mouth, listening to the wind and the ceaseless whispers in her heart. Outsiders look at the palace and see a life of silk and plenty. They don't know that golden curtains are both cloaks and chains, that walls don't just block the wind, but snuff out every spark of hope. You remember when you thought the palace was a beautiful music box, opening to a shimmering world. Now you know, that box locks away childhood, and its melody is sometimes just a cry for help no one answers. Shizuko grows up in quiet days. Each dawn, she rises early, kneels before the ancestral altar, reciting prayers whose meanings are too distant for her young mind. You see her bow, eyes closed, lips moving to repeat pleas, for her mother, her brother, for one day of freedom. She lives under the gaze of countless attendants, each with a duty, a secret, a private fear. You hear their soft steps gliding on wooden floors, the sliding doors opening and closing, whispers echoing from the corridor's end. Everyone plays their role perfectly. Only Shizuko hasn't learned, or rather, hasn't accepted the fate scripted for her. Daytime is ritual. Nighttime is darkness. You imagine Shizuko's fear as a small creature, crawling into her chest each evening, curling up, clawing. Once, you caught her sitting with Kaio, the two folding paper boats. I want this boat to float down the river, to a place where no one knows who I am, Shizuko whispered, as if afraid the wind itself might steal her words, or the adults might overhear. If she dared keep a secret diary, its first pages would be stained with tears. Perhaps a list of what's been taken, freedom to roam, the right to run and play, her mother's lullabies, hug before bed. Her true name. You think losing one's true name is losing one's roots. Nothing hurts more than living in your own body, but being unable to claim your name, to be called rightly by anyone. Harriet Jacobs wrote of the pain of having humanity stripped away. Shizuko, though an empress, is just a child caged in a beautiful prison. Beneath layers of ceremony, she steals moments for herself. A wildflower plucked hastily from the garden, hidden in her sleeve. A half-eaten sweet bun shared with Kaio under the table. A stolen glance out the window, hoping a butterfly might flutter in, a sign of the world beyond. You know these small acts are salvation. They're where she keeps the free part of herself, the last ground no emperor can tread. You recall a rainy night when the palace slept. You heard a sound-soft footsteps in the courtyard. It was Shizuko, quietly opening the door, letting rain splash in, her bare feet cold on the wet ground. She raised her hands to catch the drops, letting them soak her hair, her cheeks. You didn't call out, only stood in the dark, listening to her ragged breaths, as if she'd escaped her chains for a fleeting moment before returning to her daily role. You've often wondered, how does Shizuko endure? Where does she find the strength to open her eyes each morning, to sit with a straight back, to laugh with Ko, to nod obediently when the Emperor passes like a looming shadow? You think it's hope of seeing her mother again. Hope that growing up will bring a day when she can choose her own path, not one laid out by others. Hope that, even if no one sees, the sky still knows her true name, still hears the silent voice in her small heart. Harriet Jacobs dreamed of freedom for 7 years, hiding in a dark attic, seeing the world through a tiny crack. Shizuko, in the palace, lives like a fugitive each day, hiding herself behind a mask, longing for the moment the door cracks open. You know, history won't record those nights when a child whispered to the wind, sat silent as a shadow, or seized rare moments of freedom that flared and faded. But you will remember. You remember the mute pain, the persistent fear, the quiet defiance, and above all, the yearning for something simple, to live as herself, even for a single moment. You vowed to yourself, if you could rewrite history, you'd add lines for Shizuko, for Ko, for every child. Locked in the golden prisons of adults, you'd write of their fears, their endurance, the dreams they hid, the hopes they clung to. You'd call them by their true names, so that whenever someone listens, they'd know these children existed, hoped, loved, and were truly human. You've learned that in every imprisoned life, there comes a moment when resignation gives way to resistance, however small. Often, it follows an unexpected loss. It was the rainy season when Shizuko turned 8. Rain fell for weeks, graying the palace gardens, dripping from tiled roofs, seeping into mats and robes. From a window, you watched the steady drops carry away fallen leaves and the old secrets of this place. Ko vanished. No warning. No cries. No trace. Only a small silk handkerchief left folded by Shizuko's pillow, embroidered with a butterfly. That morning, attendants entered, folded blankets, tidied the bed, and said nothing. You overheard whispers. Kaio's family committed a crime. They've all been exiled. In the palace, disappearances are routine. But for Shizuko, it was her first blow. You saw her dazed all day, eyes dry, no tears, no screams, a strange silence, the kind only a wounded child can hold. Behind a curtain, you watched her clutch the handkerchief, her frail fingers tearing the silk before dropping it and walking away. From that day, her smile vanished, leaving only a thin shadow drifting through cold corridors. You wondered, how does Shizuko's loss differ from the loss of freedom Harriet Jacobs described? It's a quiet loss no one permits its expression. No one teaches how to heal. Adults continued their rituals, feasts, and power struggles. But a child could only swallow her pain, letting it sink into her bones. That night, you saw Shizuko tidy her bed, carefully tucking the handkerchief into her sleeve. She climbed to the window, lifted the curtain, and gazed at the rainy garden where she once ran with Ko, made cakes, and shared stories of the world beyond. You knew she was thinking, where did Ko go? If I disappear one day, will anyone care? You asked yourself, if you were her, what would you do? Would you scream? Would you run from this cage? You weren't sure, but that night you heard a small person's sigh, echoing like wind in the rainy season. Time didn't pause or heal. After that loss, Shizuko changed, quieter, less talkative, her eyes deeper, as if she aged overnight. Each morning, she no longer hurried to lessons, but sat combing her hair slowly, braiding it neatly into 2 plaits. The posture of someone who'd learned to care for herself. In her gaze, you saw something new, patience, wariness, a crack in her trust, but beneath it, a pliable will, what Harriet Jacobs called the silent dignity of the captive. Many nights, Shizuko didn't sleep. You heard her pacing her room, light as a breath. She pressed her ear to the wooden walls, as if listening for changes in the world outside. You imagined her dreaming of a day when she'd reunite with her friend, hold hands and run past the palace gates, through the gardens, beyond every barrier, toward the vast, leaf-glimmering river. Then, one night, in thick darkness, you witnessed something extraordinary. Shizuk slipped from her room, barefoot, moving along the damp wooden corridor, dodging the guards' shadows. You followed, watching her reach a corner of the garden where an old peach tree stood. She knelt, dug gently into the soft earth, and placed the silk handkerchief in a small hollow beneath the roots. No tears, no prayers, just a slow, deliberate act, as if burying her past. You understood. For the first time, this child dared to bid farewell to what was lost, to bury her pain in the earth, to claim a secret for herself. From that day, Shizuko was different. She lived more quietly, spoke even less, but her eyes no longer held only resigned sadness. There was fire, the fire of someone who knew how to keep secrets, to wait, to hope for a day when she could shape her own fate. Outsiders still saw a docile young empress, assuming nothing had changed. But you, who looked long and deep, knew a seed of freedom had sprouted. Not yet strong enough to break stone, walls or loud enough to form words, but it was there, growing in silence. You recalled Harriet Jacobs' words, "Those in chains can be forced to bow, but not to stop dreaming of freedom." Shizuko was the same. After all the disappearances, losses, and long rainy nights, what remained was an unspoken faith. One day, the door would open. One day, her name would be called rightly. One day, she'd live not to please others, but to be herself, with her past, her pain, and her enduring hope. You left the palace veranda, heart heavy with pity. You knew more losses and trials lay ahead. But after that night, you believed Shizuko was no longer entirely passive. She'd learned to keep secrets, to bury pain, to nurture a longing. History won't record those silent tears, but you do. You remember a child who rose in silence, who dared to tend a small flame of hope, so that one day it might blaze for all those never called by their true names under the sun.